Getting properly lean could mean losing 30, 40, or even 50 pounds, depending on how big you are and how much lean mass you're carrying. So this really isn't a 6-week diet plan. You're potentially going to be doing this for 6, 9, or even maybe 12 months. And if you're also running a business, working long hours, traveling, or even trying to maintain a semblance of a social life, whatever you do has to be completely sustainable so you can do all that alongside it. So there are 10 habits I would build if I was taking someone from around 30% body fat to being genuinely lean. And habit number 5 is the reason I'm holding the green tea in the thumbnail, but it's not for the reason that you think. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Harsha and I help business owners, entrepreneurs, executives improve their body composition, health and physical performance using a diagnostics first approach. Before we get into the 10 habits, there's one thing I would do first. If someone tells me they're at 30% body fat, I don't want to put them on a diet straight away. I want to understand exactly what their body composition is. And to do that, we start off with something like a DEXA scan, which is by far the most accurate way you can get a true understanding of what your body composition is. It's understanding how much fat you're carrying, where that fat's distributed, understanding how much lean muscle mass you're holding, and also how much visceral fat you have. Again, because carrying an excess amount of body fat comes with an increased cardiometabolic risk, which is why I'd also want blood work as well. So things like glucose and HbA1c, liver markers, and whatever else is appropriate for that individual. And again, this goes beyond aesthetics, it goes beyond just looking better, it's also about being healthier overall. So if someone's already moving towards poor glucose control, I want to know that now. I want to be able to measure what changes 6 or 12 months later. And a 5 to 10% reduction in starting weight can already produce meaningful improvements in a number of health markers. So you don't want to wait until you're completely lean before the health benefits begin. So now let's look at the habits. Habit number 1 is all about measuring the trend. Weigh yourself regularly, but don't react to individual weigh-ins. Your body weight can move up and down from things like water, food, how much sodium, carbs, and simply what's sitting in your digestive system. What you need to care about instead is the trend. So weigh under similar conditions. Look at your weekly average and combine that with something like your waist circumference. If at Monday you're 201 pounds and Tuesday you're 203 pounds, nothing meaningful has necessarily happened. I want to know what's happening over 4 weeks. The more objective we can make the process, the less you need to make decisions based on emotion and how you're feeling based on what you're seeing on the scale. Habit number 2 is all about anchoring your meals with protein. When you're losing a large amount of body weight, I don't just care about making the number on the scale smaller. The key is to retain as much lean mass as possible when that fat comes off. It's not just about losing weight as a whole. You want to ensure that you're dropping fat and not just weight, because weight could just mean you're losing muscle mass as well, which is not what we want. Resistance training is going to be very key here. It's going to play a huge role in that, which I'll get to in a bit, but protein matters as well. So for an active person dieting and resistance training, somewhere between 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of lean body mass is an appropriate target body weight, can be a useful, practical ballpark. Although the exact amount should be individualized. The key here is that you should simply be able to look at your plate and immediately identify the main protein source. Habit number 3, build default meals. So you don't need to invent your meals from scratch every day. That is highly unreasonable and unlikely to happen, and it just won't sustain itself. So the key here is to create 3 to 5 meals you can repeatedly make that make hitting your calories and protein and your other macro targets relatively easy. And that doesn't mean you're eating chicken and rice 7 days a week. Doesn't mean you're having boring meals necessarily, but it means that when you're busy and you know work is hectic at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, you don't need another decision to make. So have a default breakfast, have a couple lunches you can rotate between, and a few dinners that are set in the menu. And ensure that you're building them around protein, plenty of fruit and vegetables, greens on your plate, and other fiber-rich foods also. And then portion carbohydrates and fats according to what you actually need. Also looking at things like training requirements and allocating carbs as appropriate. Fundamentally, fat loss still requires you to consume less energy than you're expending over time. And the key here is ensuring that you have those repeatable meals that fit your calories and macros to make it easier for you. Habit number 4 is having a daily movement floor. So you need to establish a ritual of ensuring that you're hitting a certain number of steps a day and moving more than you are currently. If most of your day is spent sitting at your desk, an hour in the gym doesn't suddenly undo all of that. The key here is to look at your current step count and establish a realistic minimum you can stick to and make that your baseline. So walking after your meals is a great way to accumulate those steps. Taking your work calls, taking calls in general whilst you're walking to get coffee, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, and walking after meals in general. So you're increasing total activity without adding another hard training session to your week. Habit number 5 is changing what you drink. So I might have alluded to green tea in the thumbnail for this video, but it's not because green tea magically melts away your body fat. But the habit is to make those default drinks you go to essentially calorie-free or low in calorie as possible. Water, sparkling water, black coffee, tea, green tea. These are great alternatives rather than going for your sodas. Liquid calories are very easy to accumulate without really treating them like food. They creep up on you. And this becomes particularly relevant if your working week involves coffees out, dinners, drinks, and ensuring that when you do go out for those dinners and social events, you have a go-to drink that is low in calorie or 0 calorie. The idea here is that your default drinks shouldn't be adding a ton of extra calories to your daily total requirements. Now, if you've stopped here, you could probably lose a significant amount of weight, but losing weight isn't the actual objective. I don't want you to lose 35 pounds and just become a smaller version of the same body. I want you arriving at the other end, leaner, stronger, fitter, and healthier. So the next habits change what happens when the weight is coming off. Habit 6 is to plan the meals that are most likely to knock you off course before they happen. For one of the men I've worked with previously, the difficult meal often wasn't the breakfast he had at home. It was the client dinners he would go to on a Thursday evening. It was the food he was having at the airport when he was flying out. It was the hotel breakfast, drinks on a Friday. And that's when structure goes out the window. So you need to plan and account for those situations. It's looking at the menu before you arrive, knowing what you're gonna order prior to you getting there to get rid of that decision fatigue. If that dinner is going to be larger, and that's just how it's gonna be, keep the earlier meals in your day simpler, smaller, and decide beforehand whether you're drinking rather than making it that decision after 3 glasses of wine has already arrived. The key here is that you need a system in place for the parts in your life that aren't perfectly structured. Habit 7 is about strength training. You need to resistance train. For many men in the position of having lots of things going on in their life, having hectic work schedules, having 3 well-designed sessions per week can be plenty. The key here is that you don't need to defer to a bodybuilding split where you're in the gym 6-7 days a week. You need enough hard, progressive training to give your body a reason to retain, and depending on your starting point, potentially build muscle whilst you're losing that fat. And that means covering the major movement patterns, training with appropriate effort, tracking what you're doing, and gradually improving your reps, load, execution, and any other useful performance measure. The key here is that you're doing your best to retain that muscle mass as the fat is coming off, so you have that lean, fit, muscular physique at the end of this. Habit 8 is dedicated to your cardiovascular system. I wouldn't use cardio purely as a way of burning off food. We're trying to improve your cardiovascular capacity at the same time as your body composition. And a very simple place to start might be 2 manageable aerobic sessions each week, then progress that according to your current fitness and recovery. For some people, that's 30 to 40 minutes of zone 2. For some people who might be very deconditioned, even that might need to start a bit lower. Habit 9 is protecting your sleep and recovery. If you're getting 5 to 6 hours, you're exhausted, training badly, moving less and finding it harder to manage food choices, the process becomes much harder to execute over time. 6 to 8 hours are generally the advised guidelines. Using a wearable can make a huge difference because it can tell you how restorative those hours of sleep were, how consistent is your sleep over the night, and whether the hours you spend in bed are actually spent sleeping. So you're looking for trends. how much are you actually sleeping? Is your timing consistent when it comes to sleep? What happens to your resting heart rate? What happens to your heart rate variability across a stressful working week? If workload has gone through the roof and recovery has deteriorated for 7 days, that gives us good information. And it might be the case that that might not be the week to add extra load or extra training, or pushing a bit harder, and might be dialing back a bit. So using wearables to understand your sleep and recovery better so you can plan for the rest of the week. Habit 10 is to review the process once a week. The idea here is that you need to understand what happened to your average body weight, what happened to your waist, how consistent were you with your nutrition, how much did you move, what happened in the gym, did you complete your cardiovascular training sessions, how was your sleep, now how did you subjectively feel overall across the entirety of the week, and then from there deciding what needs to change. If the scale hasn't moved for 2 or 3 days, it doesn't matter, that's not meaningful. But if that trend hasn't changed across several weeks, despite good adherence to the process, now you have something worth investigating. And that's how you become objective with your data to ensure that you get the result you're looking for. So if you're starting at 30% body fat, don't think in terms of a short diet. Think in terms of building a system where you can follow long enough to actually get lean. These 10 habits are what make that possible. Controlling your intake, protecting muscle, improving fitness, and making that process sustainable around a demanding lifestyle.